My name is Ava Morgan Whitfield, and I turned 16 standing barefoot on the front porch while my mother held out a black garbage bag like it was a birthday present. She didn't say happy birthday, she didn't hug me. She just pushed the bag against my chest and said I had 10 minutes to take it and leave before the locks were changed. At first, I thought it was some kind of punishment, one of those cruel family moments that would end with someone laughing and telling me I was too sensitive. But then my father walked out behind her with my car keys in his hand and told me the car was gone. Sold. Title was in his name anyway. My phone started ringing in my pocket, probably my alarm still going off for school, and my mother snatched it before I could stop her. She threw it into the street so hard the screen cracked against the curb. Then she looked at me and said, "Plans canceled. Figure it out." From upstairs, my little sister stood in my old bedroom window, smiling like she had just won something. She waved at me and mouthed, "Finally got my space." That was when I realized this had not happened in anger. This had been planned. My clothes were packed. My room was already taken. My insurance was canceled. My savings were gone. And the people who were supposed to protect me had erased me before breakfast. I slept at a bus station that night with one garbage bag, a broken phone, and no idea that 30 days later, those same people would be calling me 35 times a day, begging me to come back. Before I tell you what they wanted and why they suddenly needed the daughter they threw away, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. My mother's name was Marissa Parker, and she had a talent for making cruelty sound like responsibility. My father's name was Ken Parker, and he had a talent for hiding behind paperwork. Together, they could explain anything away if it benefited them. My little sister's name was Brielle, and from the time she was old enough to point her toes in a pink leotard, my entire family revolved around her. Brielle was not just a kid who liked dance. She was the dream. She was the investment. She was the reason we skipped vacations, the reason bills were paid late, the reason every weekend belonged to competitions, rehearsals, costume fittings, private coaching, and hotel rooms near convention centers. My mother called it sacrifice. My father called it building a future. I called it watching my own childhood get traded in piece by piece for someone else's spotlight. If Brielle forgot her dance shoes, everyone panicked. If I forgot lunch money, I was told to be more responsible. If Brielle cried because she placed second instead of first, the whole house went silent around her pain. If I came home with straight A's, my mother glanced at the report card and asked if I could cover the dinner shift at home because Brielle had rehearsal. I learned early that being good did not make me loved. It only made me easier to ignore. The house we lived in was not even theirs. It belonged to my grandmother, Nora Whitfield, my mother's mother. Grandma Nora had bought that house decades earlier, back when the neighborhood was quiet and the maple trees were still young. She let us live there rent-free after my parents said they needed help getting back on their feet. That was the phrase they used for years. Getting back on our feet? But somehow their feet never quite touched the ground. There was always another dance fee, another emergency, another excuse for why Grandma had to cover property taxes or repairs. My parents acted like the house was theirs because they had lived in it long enough to believe comfort was the same thing as ownership. Grandma Nora loved me in a way nobody else did. She remembered my birthdays. She asked what books I was reading. She told me I was allowed to take up space. But over the years, I saw her less and less. My mother said Grandma was tired. My father said she did not like driving at night. Brielle said old people were boring anyway. Sometimes Grandma would mention sending me cards I never received. Sometimes she would ask if I liked the sweater she mailed, and I would have no idea what she was talking about. My mother always jumped in fast, saying the package must have been delayed or lost. I believed that until I got older and started noticing Brielle wearing things I had never seen before. New jackets, new dance warm-ups, little gold necklaces my mother claimed were prizes from competitions. Once, when I was 14, I heard my mother and father arguing in the kitchen. I was halfway down the stairs holding a laundry basket when my mother said, "If Mom ever finds out how much of her money went to Brielle, we are done." My father told her to keep her voice down. Then he said, "Ava does not ask questions. She never has." That sentence stayed in my head for 2 years. Ava does not ask questions. Maybe that was why they thought they could hand me a garbage bag on my 16th birthday and I would just disappear quietly. Maybe that was why they thought breaking my phone would break my connection to the world. Maybe that was why they thought selling the old Honda Grandma had helped buy for me would not matter, because the title was in my father's name. They were wrong. I may not have asked questions out loud, but I had spent years watching. I watched my mother praise Brielle like she was a miracle, and look at me, like I was a receipt she regretted keeping. I watched my father use technicalities to excuse every selfish thing he did. I watched my sister learn that if she wanted something, all she had to do was make me lose it. The morning they threw me out, Brielle already had boxes in my room. Not empty boxes. Her trophies were on my dresser. Her dance mirror was leaning against my wall. My bed had new sheets I had never seen before. She had not moved in after I left. She had moved in before I knew I was being erased. That was the part that made my chest feel hollow. This was not a family losing control in one terrible moment. This was a plan. My birthday was just the deadline. The first night, I slept in the bus station because it was the only building I knew would stay open late. I sat against the far wall with my garbage bag between my knees and my cracked phone pressed to my chest like it could still protect me. The screen was shattered and the service was dead. But when I held it at the right angle, I could still see the time. Every hour felt heavier than the last. At midnight, I was officially 16 years and 1 day old, and nobody had called. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister. Nobody checked if I was safe. Nobody checked if I was alive. I kept waiting for guilt to hit them. It never did. By morning, my back hurt from sitting upright and my throat felt raw from trying not to cry. I walked to the public library because it had free Wi-Fi and bathrooms where I could wash my face. I logged into my school email and stared at the screen for almost 10 minutes before typing one message to my manager at the diner. Her name was Elena Ruiz. She owned a small breakfast place near the edge of town where I worked weekends and a few evenings after school. I told her there had been a family emergency and asked if I could still come in for my shift. I did not tell her I had been kicked out. I did not tell her I had nowhere to sleep. I was afraid that if I said the truth out loud, someone would send me back to the house, and I could not survive being thrown away twice. Elena replied within 5 minutes. She said, "Come in. We will figure it out." Those 4 words were more kindness than I had gotten from my own parents in years. At the diner, she noticed immediately. Of course she did. My hair was messy, my shoes did not match, because my mother had packed one old sneaker and one school shoe, and I kept flinching every time someone raised their voice. Elena did not push at first. She gave me breakfast, let me charge my phone, and asked if I had a safe place to sleep. I lied and said yes. She looked at me like she knew better but respected that I was not ready. That afternoon, I used the library computer to search for youth shelters. I found 1-2 bus rides away that accepted teenagers in emergency situations. The woman at the front desk asked questions I did not know how to answer. Was I in immediate danger? Did I have a guardian? Had anyone harmed me? Had I contacted school staff? I kept saying I just needed a place for a few nights. She gave me a bed, a locker, a hygiene kit, and a stack of forms that made my hands shake. That bed was not comfortable, but it had a roof over it. For the first time since my birthday morning, I slept lying down. The next 30 days became a routine built out of fear and stubbornness. I went to school. I went to work. I went back to the shelter. I kept my head down and my grades up because school was the only part of my life that still made sense. My counselor, Mr. Hayes, started watching me closely after I wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row. He asked if everything was okay at home. I said things were complicated. He said complicated was not the same as safe. I almost told him then, but I pictured my mother walking into the school office with that cold, calm face, telling everyone I was dramatic, rebellious, ungrateful, and I swallowed the truth. My parents were very good at sounding reasonable to strangers. I was scared they would win. I opened a new bank account with my diner tips and the $72 I had hidden in a pencil case. I saved every receipt. I screenshotted Brielle's Instagram story when she posted a picture of my old room with the caption, "Finally have space to breathe." I took pictures of my cracked phone, my garbage bag, the shelter wristband, the missed school bus passes, everything. I did not know exactly why I was saving proof. I just knew that when people like my parents tell lies, evidence becomes oxygen. On day 12, I found out my health insurance had been canceled. I was at the school nurse because I had gotten dizzy during gym, and when she tried to look up my coverage, nothing was active. I remember sitting there with my hands folded in my lap, feeling smaller than I had felt even on the porch. Canceling a birthday dinner is one thing. Canceling your child's ability to see a doctor is something else. On day 18, Elena quietly put me on more shifts and started sending me home with food that she pretended was a mistake. On day 22, Mr. Hayes called me into his office again and said he was worried. I told him I was staying somewhere safe. He asked if my parents knew where I was. I said they were the reason I was not at home. His face changed, but before he could ask more, the bell rang, and I used it as an excuse to leave. On day 30, I bought a cheap prepaid phone because Elena said I needed a reliable number for work and emergencies. I gave the number to Elena, the shelter intake desk, and nobody else. That night, I was folding napkins after closing when the phone started buzzing. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then another call. Then another. By the time I got back to the shelter, I had 21 missed calls. By midnight, I had 35. And when the first voicemail played, I heard my mother's voice for the first time in a month. Not calm anymore, not cold anymore, but shaking with panic. My mother did not start with an apology. People like her never do. Her first voicemail said, "Ava, this has gone far enough. Call me back right now." Her second said, "Your grandmother is asking for you, and you are being unbelievably selfish." Her third said, "I know you are listening. Stop punishing everyone." By the 10th message, my father's voice appeared, sharper and lower. He said this was bigger than my attitude problem. He said Grandma Nora had fallen and was in the hospital. He said she was upset because she thought I hated the family, and if I had any decency left, I would come home and fix the stress I had caused. Fix the stress I had caused. I replayed that part 3 times just to make sure I heard it correctly. I had slept in a bus station because they locked me out. I had eaten leftover toast from a diner because they emptied my savings. I had been walking to school with a cracked phone and one garbage bag of clothes because they decided my sister needed my room more than I needed a home. And somehow, in their version, I was still the problem. Brielle texted from a number I did not recognize. At first, she wrote like she was bored. "Grandma keeps asking for you. Mom is freaking out." Then she got mean. "If Grandma gets worse because you are being dramatic, that is on you." I stared at that message for a long time. There was my sister, sitting in the room she stole from me, calling me dramatic for not running back to the people who had erased me. I screenshotted it. Then I screenshotted every missed call. I wrote down the times in a notebook Elena had given me. I did not call back right away. That may sound cold, but those 30 days had taught me something. When you have nothing, information is protection. If I answered too soon, they would control the conversation. If I waited, they would reveal what they actually wanted. And they did. Around 1 in the morning, my mother left a voicemail that changed everything. She said, "Grandma keeps saying she knows what we did. She is confused, Ava. She is saying things about the house and papers, and you need to come tell her you are fine before she makes this worse." The house and papers. Not, "I miss my daughter." Not, "I am sorry." Not, "Are you safe?" The house and papers. I sat on the shelter bed with my knees pulled to my chest and felt the first clear piece of the puzzle click into place. Grandma Nora had found out something. My parents were not scared because she was hurt. They were scared because she was talking. The next morning, I played the messages for Elena before my shift. She listened without interrupting, her face getting harder with each one. When the last message ended, she said, "Ava, adults who are telling the truth do not sound like that." "Mr. Hayes said something similar when I finally showed him the call log. He did not raise his voice. He did not act shocked in a way that made me feel like a problem. He just asked where I had been staying, if I had food, if I felt safe, and whether I wanted help contacting the hospital. I told him I wanted to go, but not because my parents asked. I wanted to see Grandma Nora. She was the only person in that family who ever looked at me and saw a human being instead of an inconvenience. I borrowed bus money from Elena, even though she told me it was not borrowing, and took 2 buses across town to the hospital. During the ride, my phone kept buzzing. My mother called 11 times. My father called 5. Brielle called from 2 different numbers. I did not answer. I looked out the window and remembered being 8 years old, sitting at Grandma Nora's kitchen table while she taught me how to make pancakes. She let me crack the eggs even when I got shells in the bowl. She told me mistakes meant I was learning, not failing. Nobody had said anything like that to me in years. By the time I reached the hospital, my hands were cold even though it was warm outside. I walked up to the front desk, gave Grandma's name, and asked for her room. The nurse typed, paused, and looked back at me. She asked my relationship. I said granddaughter. She checked again and said my name was not on the approved visitor list. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. My family had called me 35 times a day demanding that I come. They had said Grandma needed me. They had said I was cruel for staying away. But when I finally got there, they had made sure I could not get in. That was when I knew for sure. They did not want me to comfort Grandma. They wanted to control what Grandma said before I heard it. I waited in the hospital lobby for almost 2 hours. Every time the elevator doors opened, I looked up. I was tired, hungry, and angry in a way that felt almost calm. That was new for me. I used to think anger meant yelling or crying or shaking. But this anger was different. It was quiet. It was focused. It sat beside me like a witness. Finally, my mother walked out of the elevator carrying a paper coffee cup and a plastic bag from the cafeteria. When she saw me, her face changed so quickly I almost laughed. First relief, then fear, then that familiar mother mask sliding into place. She rushed toward me with her arms half open like we were in some emotional reunion scene. "Thank God," she said. "You came." I stepped back before she could touch me and said, "You forgot to put me on the visitor list." Her mouth opened, then closed. She said it must have been an oversight. I asked whose oversight, since she had called me all night begging me to come. She looked toward the front desk, lowered her voice, and told me not to make a scene. That was my mother in one sentence. Throw your child out on her birthday, then worry about the scene. She spoke to the nurse, and suddenly, magically, I was allowed upstairs. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and coffee. My mother walked beside me, whispering instructions. "Grandma is fragile. Do not upset her. Do not bring up the past. Do not confuse her." She has been saying strange things. I stopped walking and looked at her. What strange things? My mother smiled too fast. Just medication talk. Pain does that to older people. When we entered the room, Grandma Nora looked smaller than I remembered. Her silver hair was pulled back loosely, and one side of her face was bruised near the cheekbone. Her hip was wrapped after surgery, and there were tubes near her arm. But when she saw me, her eyes went completely clear. She reached out both hands and said my name like it hurt to say it. I crossed the room before my mother could stop me. Grandma grabbed my hand and started crying. Not soft tears, real tears, angry tears. She kept saying, "I am sorry, baby. I am so sorry." I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. She shook her head and said, "They told me you ran away. They told me you wanted nothing to do with us." My mother moved forward quickly and said, "Mom, you need to rest." Grandma ignored her. Her grip tightened around my fingers. She asked where I had been sleeping. I hesitated and she knew. Grandmothers always know the answers to the questions they are most afraid to ask. I showed her my phone, the cracked screen, the call log, the texts. Brielle's message blaming me, the picture of the garbage bag, the screenshot of Brielle in my room. Grandma stared at each one without speaking. My mother kept saying, "Ava, this is not necessary." Grandma finally looked at her and said, "Be quiet, Marissa." I had never heard anyone say my mother's name like that. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed. My mother went pale. Grandma asked me to tell her everything, so I did. I told her about the morning of my birthday, the bag, the car, the phone, the insurance, the savings account my parents said was no longer mine. I told her about the bus station, the shelter, the diner, school, and 30 days of silence. With every sentence, Grandma's face changed, not because she doubted me, because she believed me, and believing me meant understanding exactly what her own daughter had done. When I finished, she closed her eyes and whispered, "I knew something was wrong." Then she told me what happened before the fall. A neighbor had called her 2 weeks after my birthday and casually asked if I was away at some program because nobody had seen me. Grandma asked my mother. My mother said I was staying with a friend because I wanted independence. Grandma did not believe her. She came to the house. My father would not let her into my room. My mother said I had taken my things and left. Grandma pushed past them and saw Brielle's dance trophies on my dresser, her clothes in my closet, her mirror against my wall. That was when Grandma started yelling. She told them they had no right to put me out of a house that belonged to her. She told my mother she wanted my number. My mother claimed she did not have it. My father claimed I had blocked everyone. Grandma said she was calling her lawyer. My mother's face twisted when Grandma said that part. Grandma looked at me and whispered, "The house, Ava, the fund, the papers." They knew. Before she could say more, my mother cut in sharply. "Mom, you are confused. The medication is making you mix things up." Grandma turned her head slowly. "I may have a broken hip," she said, "but I do not have a broken mind." The room went silent. Then my father appeared in the doorway. He looked at my hand in Grandma's, then at my mother, then at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear on his face. My father tried to take control the moment he walked in. That was his habit. He adjusted his voice, lowered his shoulders, and spoke like the only adult in a room full of emotional children. "Ava," he said, "this is not the place for accusations. Your grandmother needs peace." Grandma Nora lifted her hand, weak but steady, and pointed to the chair near the bed. "Sit down, Ken." He sat. Not because he respected her, but because the nurse was standing right outside the open door and he did not want witnesses hearing him refuse. Grandma asked him one question. "Did you throw my granddaughter out of my house on her 16th birthday?" My father sighed like he was tired of dealing with unreasonable people. He said they had made a difficult parenting decision. He said I had become disrespectful. He said Brielle needed stability. He said I had been given options. I almost spoke, but Grandma squeezed my hand, stopping me. She looked at my father and said, "That was not an answer." My mother started crying. Not because she was sorry, because crying had worked for her before. She said no one threw me out. She said I wanted freedom. She said teenagers twist things. She said I had always resented Brielle. Grandma listened until my mother ran out of breath. Then she said, "I saw the garbage bag. I saw the room. I saw the messages. And I saw your face when I said I was calling Grant." That name made both of my parents freeze. Grant Mercer was Grandma's attorney. I did not know much about him then, only that Grandma trusted him, and my mother hated hearing his name. Grandma told me to get her purse from the cabinet. My mother moved first, but Grandma snapped, "Ava, not you." Inside the purse was a small address book with phone numbers written in neat blue ink. Grandma told me to call Grant. My father stood up immediately and said absolutely not. Grandma looked at him and said, "You are in my house because I allowed it. Do not confuse my kindness with permission to command me." That sentence landed like a slap. I dialed the number. Grant answered on the third ring. Grandma's voice was weak, but her mind was clear. She said she needed him at the hospital as soon as possible. She said it involved the house, the trust, and possible financial abuse of a minor. My mother made a sound like she had been punched. Grant arrived that afternoon with a leather briefcase and the calm face of a man who had spent decades watching families destroy themselves over money. He asked Grandma several questions in front of the nurse to confirm she understood where she was, what day it was, who we were, and what decisions she wanted to make. She answered every question perfectly. My parents looked sick. Then Grant explained the papers. Years earlier, when Grandma sold a piece of land she inherited from her late husband, she had created 2 education accounts, one for me and one for Brielle. Mine had started when I was born. With interest and contributions, it had grown to almost $38,000. Not cash for shopping, not prize money. Protected education money for tuition, books, safe housing, and transportation connected to school. She had also written conditions into the family trust. My mother and father could live in the house rent-free as long as both children were being cared for fairly, and neither child's designated funds were misused, redirected, or withheld as punishment. If either child was abandoned, financially exploited, or forced out, an independent trustee could take control. I felt dizzy hearing it, not because of the money, because suddenly my entire life made sense in the ugliest way. My parents had not thrown me out because they could not afford me. They threw me out because I was in the way. As long as I was visible, Grandma could ask questions. As long as I was in the house, she could see the difference between how I lived and how Brielle lived. But if I disappeared, and they convinced Grandma I had run away, they could paint me as unstable, ungrateful, maybe even undeserving. Then they could push to have my education money redirected to Brielle's dance future. My father tried to interrupt Grant, saying that was an unfair interpretation. Grant opened a folder and removed copies of emails my father had sent 3 years earlier, asking whether unused funds from one grandchild's education account could be transferred to the other for specialized training. Specialized training meant dance. Grant said the request had been denied. My father's mouth shut. My mother whispered that they were only trying to support Brielle's talent. Grandma asked, "At the cost of Ava's safety?" My mother said nothing. Grant asked me to list everything that happened after my birthday. I told him dates, times, what was said, what was taken. He wrote it all down. When I mentioned my father selling the Honda, Grant asked who paid for it. I said Grandma had helped with most of the money, but the title was put in my father's name for insurance. Grant turned to my father. Is that accurate? My father said it was complicated. Grant said, complicated is not the same as legal. That was the moment I understood why my parents were afraid. Not because they felt guilty, because every technicality they had used against me was starting to turn around and face them. Grandma asked Grant what could be done immediately. He said the education account could be moved under independent control. The house arrangement could be reviewed. A formal notice could be issued. And because I was 16, not 18, school staff and the proper authorities would need to be informed that my legal guardians had forced me out and concealed my location from the homeowner and from extended family. My mother started sobbing harder. My father said they would fight it. Grant looked at him and said he was free to try. Then he added that judges tend to look poorly on adults who cancel a child's insurance, take her savings, sell her transportation, and leave her sleeping in public places while living rent-free in a house they do not own. Nobody spoke after that. For once, there was no speech my father could make, and no tears my mother could use. Grandma looked at me, still holding my hand, and said, "Baby, they tried to make you disappear because they were afraid of what you were worth. But your worth was never theirs to decide." The next day, Grant came back with emergency documents. Grandma Nora looked tired, but there was steel in her voice when she asked for a pen. My mother tried one last time. She stood beside the bed and said, "Mom, please do not do this while you are emotional." Grandma looked at her and said, "I was emotional when I trusted you. Today, I am informed." That shut the room down. Grant placed the papers on the rolling table and explained everything slowly. My education fund would be moved under an independent trustee so my parents could never touch it, redirect it, freeze it, or use it to control me. The money would go towards school, safe housing, transportation, and basic needs connected to finishing my education. I would not suddenly become rich. I would become protected. And after 30 days of learning what it felt like to have no protection at all, that meant more than any number could. Grandma signed. My mother cried harder. My father paced near the window, jaw tight. Like anger could somehow rewrite the ink. Then Grant handed him a formal notice regarding the house. My parents had 90 days to begin paying market rent into an account managed by the trust, or they had to leave. If they refused, the trust would begin legal removal proceedings. My father actually laughed once, short and ugly, and said, "You cannot kick us out of our own home." Grandma did not even blink. She said, "It was never your home. It was the place I let you live while I believed you were raising my grandchildren with love." My father said they had spent years maintaining the property. Grant asked for receipts. My father said that was not the point. Grant said receipts were often the point. My mother tried a softer approach. She turned to me, wiping her face, and said, "Maybe we could all go home and talk as a family." I asked her one question. "Would you be asking me to come home if Grandma had not changed the papers?" She looked at me, and for half a second, the mask slipped. The answer was on her face before she said anything. No, she would not have called. She would not have searched. She would not have cared where I slept. She only wanted me back because losing control of me meant losing control of everything else. My father told me I was destroying the family. I said, "No, you did that when you handed your daughter a garbage bag and locked the door." Brielle was not at the hospital, but she made sure everyone knew how she felt. She texted me all afternoon. "You ruined my competition season. Mom says we might have to sell my costumes. This is all because you had to be dramatic." I screenshotted every message and sent them to Grant. Then I put the phone face down. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the need to answer her. That was its own kind of freedom. By the end of the week, Mr. Hayes knew everything. The shelter documented the dates I had stayed there. Elena wrote a statement confirming I came to work with a broken phone, mismatched shoes, and no stable place to sleep. The school nurse confirmed my insurance had been canceled. Nobody had to exaggerate. The truth was enough. Once the proper reports were made, my parents could no longer tell people I had run away because I was rebellious. They had to explain why their 16-year-old daughter had been missing from their home for a month, while they continued posting dance photos and living in a house owned by the grandmother they had lied to. And people noticed. Dance moms noticed first because they notice everything. One of Brielle's teammates' mothers asked why my mother had been fundraising for travel fees while her older daughter was in a youth shelter. Another asked why Grandma Nora's house was suddenly under legal review. My mother stopped going to the studio for a while. My father lost a big sale at the dealership after a customer recognized his name from local gossip and asked if he was the man who sold his daughter's car after throwing her out. Was that fair? Maybe gossip is messy. But so is sleeping at a bus station because your parents decided paperwork mattered more than you. Grandma arranged for me to stay with her neighbor, Mrs. June Wallace, until longer-term housing could be approved through the trustee. Mrs. Wallace had a small guest room with yellow curtains and a lock on the door. The first night there, I stood inside that room for almost 5 minutes, just turning the lock open and closed. It sounds small, but after everything, a door I controlled felt like a miracle. Elena kept me on at the diner. Mr. Hayes helped me build a school plan so I could catch up without burning out. Grant made sure my education fund was safe. Grandma started physical therapy and told every nurse who would listen that stubborn women heal faster when they have unfinished business. My parents tried to call. At first, they were angry. Then they were desperate. My mother said she had made mistakes. My father said things got out of hand. Brielle said she missed me, but only after her dance coach told my mother the unpaid balances had to be cleared before the next competition. I did not block them immediately. I let the voicemails collect because evidence had become a habit. But I stopped letting their voices decide who I was. 90 days later, they did not have the money for market rent. The house they had treated like a throne became the place they had to pack up and leave. I did not go watch them move out. I did not need to. I had already seen the ending in my mind. My mother standing near the same front door where she had handed me a garbage bag. My father holding paperwork that no longer protected him. Brielle crying because the room she stole was not hers to keep. They told me to figure it out. In the end, they were the ones with 90 days to do exactly that. But the real lesson was not that they lost the house. It was not even that they lost the money. The real lesson was that being unwanted by the wrong people does not mean you are worthless. Sometimes the people who call themselves family are only protecting the version of you they can use. Real family protects your future when you are too young, too scared, or too broken to protect it yourself. Real love does not make you earn shelter. It does not cancel your safety to reward someone else's dream. It does not throw you away and then call you selfish for surviving. I learned to save proof. I learned to ask for help from safe adults. I learned that money and legal documents matter because they can protect vulnerable people when emotions and promises fail. Most of all, I learned that my life did not begin when my mother loved me. It began when I stopped believing I needed her permission to matter. So if your own family threw you away, then came back only because they were losing money, what would you do?